Yeah, that's what, so you want them made, like when they butcher.
Broadcasting to an audience of tens of
thousands. Yep,
Okay.
worldwide audience.
So, they freeze theirs. Woo! Okay, yeah, they were like so.
It's the evening meeting.
Oh, I see the evening chair now.
6 o'clock, and I'll call the county board meeting to order. We'll begin with the flag pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everybody that's here this evening. Roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Schlangen? Here. Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Pop?
Here.
Commissioner Gopinski?
Here.
Commissioner Heinen?
Here.
Approve or amend the agenda. We got any additions, corrections, or anything like that?
We have one addition. It's the voting equipment application, equipment grant for auditor treasurer. If we could please add that right after the consent agenda. The other item you have up there is just a replacement for the item that's currently in the agenda. It's the services agreement with Benton Economic Partnership. We just wanted you to see that the agreement had been signed off on. Michelle Meyer, Assistant County Attorney. So that's already in your packet, though.
Is the voting stuff, that's Nadine, correct?
The voting is a new item to add as an amendment. Again, if we could please add that right after consent.
All right, sounds good.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the amended agenda.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the amended agenda. Is there any other discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Announcements. County board meetings are broadcast live and video recorded on YouTube. Please refrain from speaking from the audience area and come to the podium so that the viewers can hear you. The county board observes Robert's Rules of Orders for its meetings, so please obtain the board chair's consent before addressing the county board. Public comments are generally reserved for open forum segment of the public hearing. However, public comments on the agenda items may be allowed at the discretion of the board chair. As we begin today's meeting, please turn your cell phones to vibrate. Thank you. Open forum, is anybody back there? Nope. Consent agenda, we have items 1 through 11.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to pull item 1 if I could, please.
Anything else? Anybody else want anything pulled?
Mr. Chair, I'll move for approval of consent agendas 2 through 11.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the consent agenda for items 2 through 11. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Commissioner Johnson, number 1.
Just one small correction on the minutes, and more, it was for intent than it was anything else. In the discussion in regards to the building inspector, where it talks about myself as adding that there's 21 counties, I guess my intent was to say that there are only 21 counties. So I just need one word in there, please, for the intent. And that is it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that for me one more time?
Yep, so where I'm talking about in the minutes of there are 21 counties that have adopted the state building code,
Yep.
I just need one word in there, only 21 counties.
Okay.
Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep, and I'll move to approve item number 1 on the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve consent agenda item number 1. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Then we'll move on to the added item, the voting stuff. There was a item before you on your place when you came there. I think this is Nadine.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening.
Good evening.
Yep, I just had added this on. So what I'm requesting from the board is to approve a resolution for us to submit a VEGA grant number 3 for additional election equipment. At this time, we really don't know how much money we'll get from the VEGA grant number 3. It really depends on how many counties do apply for it. So the funds were appropriated the very first year, meaning this year, $750,000, and then next year an additional $750,000. So can't give you an answer of how much I expect to receive, but I think it would be wise for us to at least submit the grant and see what we get, and then we can go from there once we know what we're gonna receive.
Is there any questions for Nadine? I guess I have one, Nadine. Would this be for additional equipment or upgrades to our current equipment?
Yeah, so as you know, we've replaced all of the equipment except for the assisted voting devices. Those are the devices that assist the people that have vision and disability. So those machines that we have are actually 15 years old. They do not get used a whole lot here and there. So they're in very good condition. But this VEGA grant that's coming forward is specifically designated for additional election equipment. So if the county wanted to consider updating the assisted voting devices, this is the money that we could utilize to do that. Back in, I believe it was 15 years ago, our assisted voting devices cost the county $126,000. 15 years ago. Today, replacing that equipment would cost us about $96,000. So, any other questions? Just looking for you to approve a resolution so we can just submit the application for the grant.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so Nadine, there is no dollar amount?
That we'll receive from VEGA,
Right.
the VEGA grant, not at this time, because it all depends on how many counties apply for the grant money.
And then you're gonna distribute the $750,000 to all the counties that apply?
750,000 will, be divided amongst whoever applies. So once we get that final number, I'll come back to the board with that number and we can discuss whether we want to proceed forward with utilizing those funds. Whatever funds we do receive, if we do purchase new assisted voting devices, the county would have to match that 50%.
Thank you,
So-
that was my next
Any
question.
other questions?
Anything else?
First time I actually seen things go down over years.
Yeah, this is true.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the resolution brought to us before the Auditor Treasurer's Office to apply for the VEGA 3 election equipment grant.
I'll second.
Most been made and seconded to apply for their voting equipment grant. Is there any other discussion on this? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nadine.
You need a minute here, Monty? Next on the agenda is Roxanne from the Department of Development to conduct a public hearing to consider approval of a mere final plat entitled Wainwright Edition submitted by James and Teresa Wainwright. Roxanne?
All right, 1 second here to pull this item up and then share it.
And this will be a public hearing, so we'll hear for the staff report before opening the public hearing.
Okay. So the item before you is a minor final plat entitled Wainwright Edition. This is in Langola Township and it is directly to the east of Benton Beach. It's off of County Road 2 and North Freedom Road. The Wainwrights own about 7.2 acres of property, and they are wishing to subdivide it into 3 lots. One of the lots would contain the existing dwelling that's on the site. This is the R2 district. The minimum lot size is 1 acre. So by splitting this into 3 lots, we are meeting that minimum criteria, with lot 1 that has the existing home at 3.42, lot 2 being 2.23, and then lot 3 as 1 acre. Each lot does have sites for type 1 septics, and as you can see on the sketch that I have on the screen, lots 2 and 3 do have suitable land outside of the floodplain. Langola Township did review this and they did sign off on the preliminary plat. So with that, staff recommends approval. And just so we're aware, I know there is a member of the public online that would like to address the board at the public hearing portion.
Okey-doke. If the applicant is present or a representative is here, would they please come to the podium, give your name, address, and tell us what you're seeking? I think they've explained it, but sure.
This is Jim Wainwright,
Yes.
and we're just going to split this flat acreage into 3 pieces like she already said. And what else do you want to know?
I guess that's about it. Yeah, I know you've lived there a long time, so.
Oh, yeah.
Okey-doke. We'll now open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the county board on this agenda item? If so, please come to the podium and give your name and address.
My name is Steve Saviola.
Okay.
My address is 100 North Freedom Road. It's currently my cabin. I've rebuilt it to become my house here in the next, well, maybe next week, actually. You know, it's interesting. When you guys put the notices out, you know, it said the Wainwright addition. It makes it sound like it's gonna be a housing development or something.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here. I just wanted to see it was. And if Jim would've picked up his phone today, I wouldn't even had to come, so I was afraid he was gonna build a Walmart or something. But I can tell you that I've known Jim my whole life. My dad and him bought the land originally to keep houses from being built back there. So, looking at what he's proposing, I have no problem with that. I support it as a good neighbor should, so.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else in the audience that wishes to come before? Anybody else?
Yeah, but online, I think.
Is there somebody online?
That was Steve.
Oh, that was Steve.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay,
Wow.
Very confused.
it's quick.
Yeah. Final call for anyone wishing to address the county board. Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Is there any emails, letters, or other communications that are related to the record?
No, I just had the one conversation with Steve earlier today, and then Langola Township did approve the preliminary plat at their meeting in October.
Has the department received any comments or concerns from state agencies, cities, or townships?
No,
Just the township?
Just-
That they
yep.
were in, okay. If any official action was required by the affected township, it was taken, right?
correct.
Okay. The county board will now have time for questions of the staff and discussion. As a reminder to the audience, the public hearing is closed. If there are any questions or comments from board members before we take action on this item? Any questions, comments?
Mr.
Steve?
Chair. Roxanne, so the entrances into lot 2 and 3 will be off of North Freedom Road. Will that be a shared entrance driveway or
That will be up to the township at the
township?
time.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'd also add the planning commission obviously reviewed this as a recommendation to the board and approved it without any comment. So with that, I'd make a motion to approve this minor final plat entitled Wainwright Addition.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the minor final plat for Wainwright Addition. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're gonna have a discussion on the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency public hearing requirements for feedlots.
Okay. So I was recently notified that state statute states that the county is to hold the public hearing portion of feedlot permits that the PCA issues. This has been in effect since 2001, and I actually spoke to Monty about this, and it sounds like at one time they were held at the county level, and then at some point they must have transferred to the townships. However, the PCA is no longer accepting that the townships hold those meetings. So they're coming back to the county, and my proposal is just to streamline those through the planning commission, since they're already reviewing things such as, livestock waste facilities, tier 2 feedlots. So I think it would be best to hold them at that level. At this time, there's no proposed cost that would be associated with us hosting those meetings. I would suggest that we require that the applicant publish their own public notice and pay for that. Since we actually don't know what those requirements are, I think it's best to just do the minimum of hosting the meeting as required by statute.
Any questions, comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson, how do you feel about that?
Well, the planning commission did review this the other night.
Okay.
It makes sense. We're not a delegated county, so we've got to follow those MPCA rules anyways. I always remind people, one of the first things before they even come in for a conditional use permit in this situation is they need their MPCA permits in place first anyways. So that's really nothing too drastic of a change.
Right.
I do remember when I received mine, they were done here at the county.
Okay. So, but we won't be reviewing and doing everything for the large the tier 3 or the largest ones?
So anything that is 300 animal units, or up to 300 animal units requires an MPCA feedlot permit. The county doesn't require feedlot permits until you are over 1,000 animal units. At that point, then it's a conditional use permit, and we allow up to 2,000 animal units. Any more than that would be outside of what the county permits for feedlots.
Because them hearings can get quite contensive or whatever, you know, with
Interesting.
neighbors, yeah.
Yep. And so in my conversations with the PCA, the planning commission or whichever board it is that's hosting this is really is not acting on the permit itself. They're simply opening the public hearing, taking comment, and closing the public hearing. The minutes are provided to the applicant to provide to the PCA, but there's no action or real conversation that happens around the permit because it's not the county's jurisdiction. We're not issuing the permit.
Okay,
if
so,
It's an interesting situation.
right,
If I can, Mr. Chair, I think that was kind of the planning commission's idea too, was since they would normally deal with that type of thing, there was no purpose of bringing it to the full county board.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're not acting on anything, we're just
Yeah.
reviewing the public hearing.
I
And
would have to agree.
so my concern more on a personal level is, so the MPCA out of Brainerd is still gonna be reviewing your feedlot every 5 years as they do now?
Nothing will change with
Okay.
that process. No, this was simply them making us aware that we need to follow that public hearing process.
Okay,
On average, how many of these a year do you do?
Well, we haven't done any of them, and I'm not aware of, I don't think there's too many that are completed. It was actually Mike McMillan with the NRCS that pointed it out to me, that we need to be following this. So he's the one that generally would work with the townships, and he said he doesn't see a whole lot come through, just because we have a lot of established feedlots already, so something new isn't too typical, but we will be seeing a few come through with new chicken barns.
Okay.
did he think that the poultry barns would come under this?
Yes.
They'd be under the animal units of 3?
Oh, no, they would need to be at a public hearing and needing those. And I don't know if every one of them will be like that. He just had a particular case that he felt was going to be needing to follow this process in the very near future.
We were just trying to figure out what the, you know.
I would think maybe to double check on that, because if I remember, the animal units on those barns are a 005 at the number of head, brings them in at 214 animal units.
And
So-
honestly, that's something that the PCA will tell you you're gonna need a feedlot permit.
Sure.
Go to the county for your public hearing, and that's probably the extent of our involvement.
And I think those animal unit numbers you're questioning are, we have those established in our list,
Yep.
you know, so.
Yeah,
That'd
but
be-
I won't be the one determining the animal units. That'll be through their form
Right.
that they have, the
Right.
PCA.
Okay, and this was just a discussion item. You do not need to take.
Yeah, it was just making you aware that we get to host this.
All right.
Yeah,
Good for you.
thank you.
Any other
So-
questions for her?
And one more thing before Roxanne steps away from the podium. I know we like to allow Roxanne to get on with the rest of her evening. So we'd like to set a date to discuss the Land Services Organization. So maybe we could just identify a date that's gonna work for Roxanne and for you all. We can schedule it later in the meeting, but that allows Roxanne to get going. Do you actually have a suggestion for us, Roxanne, in terms of the date that would or wouldn't work? And I think probably sooner is better than later.
Yes.
To have this discussion.
I can make whatever work.
You're
Okay.
talking before the end of the year, I take it, Monty?
Excuse me?
Before the end of the year, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You bet. Again, sooner is better than later on this topic, sure. So, how's next week looking?
Well, we have one Monday already.
We have one Monday already.
So, yeah, and I can't do it afterwards. I just scheduled something else with somebody
Would you be
else.
inclined to start early, earlier to discuss this matter and then human services later?
Yes.
Correct, 'cause
So how about start at 9?
start at 9.
Start at 9?
Yep.
Yep.
And
But
then.
you think an
and
hour
then
is enough
move-
time?
Excuse me?
Is an hour enough time?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Start at 9 and then that 10 o'clock move to human services. And so you don't have to jump around. Why don't we would just start it in human services third
Okay.
floor conference room. Yeah.
Okay, 9 a.m. Monday,
9 a.m. Yeah.
works for
That
me?
works.
Okay.
All right.
We'll just a note for Beth. We'll need to amend the the posted meeting notice to add to the topic and the time.
Yep.
So,
Okay, no.
thank you.
Thanks,
That'll
Roxanne.
work out great.
Thanks, Roxanne.
Monty,
Okay, I better get up. Okay. Yeah, just a sec.
better get up.
Right, now my junk here. Almost there. Mr. Chair, you had an announcement that did you want to make that announcement for us before we?
Oh, sure, that if anybody's here to propose their personal taxes, sign up in the back and the land services assessor will contact you in the coming days to speak to you in private. This is Truth and Taxation is for your thoughts and considerations on what we as a county spent this year. And it's not about your personal taxes.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that, right? If you had a issue about your value on your TNT notice and you'd like to talk with our assessor, we have a sign-up sheet back there on the back. And so Mike doesn't have to stay super late. It's probably more convenient for him just to give you a call. Because sometimes these issues take a fair amount of research and some time. So if you're inclined, you're welcome to sign up that list and Mike can give you a call. Okay. I need my water. I have a very
Okay.
dry mouth. Okay. Well, Mr. Chair, we're required under Minnesota statute to discuss the budget and levy, and then the public is given an opportunity to have comments and ask questions. My comments will be deliberately short, so the folks here in the audience will have plenty of time to ask questions, and hopefully we can answer them for them. So, this material has been posted on our website for about a month, and it's also in your packet. So this is the material that I'd like to cover again pretty briefly tonight. So, let's talk about the proposed budget levy. It's a 5.9% increase, or 1.19 million. I just wanted, one thing I wanted to stress is that is even though we have this increase this year, our 10-year average levy increase is still about only 0.8%. One thing to also note is that even though our levy will go up 5.9%, we're still expecting about 7.7% growth in our tax capacity. So we should see our tax rate come down. I want to jump to a graph that's in this packet, and it shows the trend line of our tax rate. So our tax rate hit its peak back in 2013 of 77.74% of tax capacity, and it's down now to 54.3. So over 20 percentage points drop since 2013 in our county tax rate. Let's go back then to the summary of some things that are in the proposed budget and levy. So you can see in this sheet, this shows you the major components of that 1.19 million increase. Employee compensation benefits, of course, is by far the largest portion of the increase. That's explained by a few factors. We implemented a classification compensation study. There's a 2.5% COLA. There are step increases, and also there is a 12% health insurance increase for 2022. One of the things that we talked about as one of the indirect effects of the classification compensation study is that many of our, in fact, most of our employees resume getting step increases. Using any given year, it's about, I would say, 60% of our employees would be eligible for a step increase. With the classification compensation study, that moved to virtually everyone. I think except one employee is topped out and wouldn't get steps, but everyone else would. So that explains some of the increase in salary and benefits costs. The board and proposed budget added some new positions, and we'll get to somewhat what those are a little bit later. The base budget also restored funding for hardware capital equipment. This is for things like motor graders and plow trucks and so on. Extremely expensive pieces of equipment. I think we've learned from Chris is that a new plow truck with all the fixings is approaching $300,000 these days. Certainly not inexpensive pieces of equipment. Help bring the levy increase down, we use some of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, $671,000. We're allowed to use these resources to replace lost revenues. For us, it's really two places. It's in inmate boarding revenues and also state aid due to people driving less and buying less gasoline and other fuels. So the new positions have some revenue offsets. It's mostly human services, where we generate some federal revenues when we increase some of our administrative costs. The base budget used some additional reserves to bring the levy increase down and some miscellaneous increases. So the next bullet down talks about some of the new positions that are added in the proposed budget. Human services, a homeless outreach social worker, a men's choice social worker, a public health nurse, adult services case aide. I just want to go back though and stress is that all of these positions, if I recall correctly, 2 or 3 were fully offset by revenues. And you can see again up here above, the total revenue offset for those is $255,000. So in many instances with human services, positions are often fully offset by revenues. And we added an additional help desk position for IT and a human resources professional position. And the sheriff's office requested a part-time investigative aide at 20 hours a week, and that was funded. And one of the last bullet points is the board in the proposed budget adds $50,000 to BEP to allow it to retain support staff. And I think I covered the last bullet point there about the things that make up. It's probably worth reemphasizing again is county government is a people-intensive operation, so when you have COLAs and health insurance and step increases, those things add up pretty quickly and can translate into some decent-sized levy increases. Let's move on down, and again, our task tonight is to talk about the budget and levy. The statute doesn't tell us specifically what to talk about, so we get to kind of make it up when we talk about it. So again, I'll move through this fairly quickly. These are some graphs we've used in the past. It kind of talks about, so where does the funding come from? Benton County is going to have about almost a $50 million budget next year, 49 million. Where does all that come from? Well, 44% comes from the property tax levy, 17% for human services, and you can see on down the line, federal and state funding for roads at 12%. One of the new and bigger slices of the pie is different from past years is here what I'm circling, the wheelage tax and the local option sales tax together account for 7% of our total funding sources, or $3.3 million. So again, that's a newer part that was added a little over a year ago, the wheelage tax was, the local option sales tax. So of course, again, with county government, the largest source of funding is going to be the property tax for us. All right, so where does it go? Well, again, there's the $49 million budget. Again, as we said earlier, salaries and benefits make up the largest part, oftentimes, of our budget. Together, and this is an all funds budget, which includes capital outlay, salary, wages, benefits make up just over half, about 52% of the all funds budget. And then on down the operating expenses, capital equipment, employee, and so on. I like to include this graph because it illustrates what I call kind of a typical county department. And your typical county department doesn't have all the, for example, the big road program and the large capital outlay. This would be, I guess, what I call your typical county department. In your typical county department, about 74% of its budget is made up of salaries, benefits. And then again, that's just further illustrating when you have these salary effects, like, for example, the COLA or steps, how it translates into those increases in the levy. Okay, so that's that. And then the last one is a functional graph of, well, where does the funding go by a functional category? For us, human services is the largest function in county government, 15.5 million. And then highway is next at 10.9. General government, 9.8. And so what is general government? Well, that's things like auditor, treasurer, assessor, recorder, department of development, county administrator, county board. Those are all those other functions which we lump into that category called general government. And public safety at 19%. But those are the top three. Top three make up 73% of your overall budget. The rest of this is just lots of spreadsheets in detail, which I wasn't planning to cover, but I'm also, of course, happy to answer any questions about them if you have them. One thing I did just want to highlight lastly is just to reemphasize that I'm scrolling through here pretty quickly, but this sheet shows you can see in items number 21 through 25, these are the human services positions. So the gross cost of those positions was $307,000, but there was $250,000 of revenue offset. So a fairly small levy effect from those positions in human services. And then the last page shows funding to outside agencies. And at the bottom, you can see the additional amount that was allocated to the Benton Economic Partnership. So again, Mr. Chair, that's my summary. I'm happy to yield the podium to folks in the audience that want to ask questions, and I'll be happy to try and answer them.
So we've had the presentation from staff, and I'll invite members of the audience to the podium for questions and comments about the proposed 2022 budget and levy. If you wish to address the county board, you should have been signed up on the back of the room. When you come to the podium, please give your name and address. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak? Okay.
I'm Leonard Pop, live in Graham Township. And what struck me when I received my notice was the percentage that my taxes are going to go up from last year. I have three parcels, what was it, 12% and 8%, and I think the last one was 1%, and that was only because the school levies were low on that particular. I did not, or I am not at this point disputing the valuation of my property. I haven't pursued that. My assumption is that the valuation of property is pretty much driven by state regulation and we can't change too much on that.
Correct.
So I'm assuming everybody's went up similarly, or maybe went down similarly. But what strikes me is that why over all these last couple of years, my taxes have gone down slightly or stayed the same. This year, they're going up. We have funds coming from the coronavirus, the stimulus, all those funds coming in. We have extra highway funds coming in from the wheelage tax, and all those funds coming in, but still the property taxes, unless it's only mine that's going up. If it is, I guess I've signed up on the wrong sheet then. But, I get a sense for why all of a sudden, and I feel it's all of a sudden, things are going up. And we've had a fairly large influx of funding to our county.
Right,
So
go ahead.
where's it coming, or where's it going, or what's that all about?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I think Monty can kind of clear this up a little bit, but our levy is 5.9%, but we're actually going to be recognizing what was the number? 7.1?
7.7.
7.7 in growth. So your taxes in theory will come down. It's just the valuations of your properties have went up.
And maybe Mr. Harvey could speak on how the valuations are determined a little bit. That might help him out.
My actual, not the valuation portion, some of that went up.
Right.
But the bottom line, the percentage, or the numbers, the dollar that's stated, that has gone up by those, like I
And
said,
how-
12%, 8%, and 1%.
Can I ask, did you look at how much of that is school district driven?
Yes, you can ask. I didn't do the percentages on how much is school driven.
Right.
I know on the one parcel, the school amount went down from the prior year. So that overall, my taxes. But there was, yes, the school portion was evident
Okay.
as causing
Are
some
you,
of that.
are you all in one school district, or are you in two, I think?
One, fully.
One school district, fully, okay. Oh, you're lucky you ain't in Royalton or Sauk Rapids.
But, you know, maybe I'm supposed to be lucky then, but still, my question is, why, what, with all this influx, what seems to be influx of
Right.
funds,
I can add a little bit on that. So for the, we talked earlier about this American Rescue Plan Act funding, and Benton County's getting $8 million of that, but unfortunately, we can't use a penny of it for salary and benefit costs. It can go for things like broadband, water, sewer, responding to the pandemic, but it can't just essentially go to replace levy dollars that fund our salary and benefit costs.
Lost revenue.
It isn't available for that, and that is true also for the local option sales tax dollars. Those statutorily have to go to road projects, so we can't use them for salary and benefit costs.
But we have over the years, there's very few, if any, levy dollars that are going
At this
to
point,
roads.
there's zero.
Yeah,
That's
we're-
right.
we're
Yeah,
either using
zero
the-
levy going into
You know, the
roads.
sales tax, wheelage tax, and then, state aid money, that's all we're using for roads. And, you know, I think our highway department has done a pretty good job in the last few years, getting some of these roads back in shape.
In the last 2 years with COVID, this board, Commissioner Pop and myself wanted to make sure we were at zero for the last 2 years, and now we have to make adjustments, unfortunately.
are the biggest line item seems to be salary and benefits.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are they reasonable? Are those numbers that are being proposed, it's significant? Does that seem reasonable though?
Yeah, we did a class and comp study because we were losing people at a significant rate. And we actually had to adjust our salaries in order to slow down the exit of our county. From that, we were lagging behind in several different departments by quite a bit.
Mr. Chair?
That's another term for a market study, a wage study or market study. So we compared ourselves to about 15 other counties. And I think we found we were close to 10% behind the average of those comparative counties. So that some of this increase is bringing our folks up to the average of those comparative counties.
So we're coming up to the average.
Yeah, Mr. Chair?
The average, yeah.
And actually, we were actually kind of behind what the state guidelines were. We were close to being in some violations there.
We were found out of compliance with something called the pay equity law. And one of the needs for the study was to put us in solid compliance with the state pay equity law. It says you pay women basically comparable to men.
Sure.
Yeah, cut it short, right? Yeah, that's the way that works. So.
You know, when you look at 280 employees, approximately of what we have in the county, that number adds up real quick, you know, when we did our wage study in that.
Yep.
My only question is, should I be having my name on that other list? Or did everybody's valuation go up
I would say most.
without
Mine did.
spending a lot?
I know mine did.
Mine did.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think valuations, you know, you use comparable sales and there's been some comparable sales. I know agricultural entered actually had the increase, and I don't think it's done increasing yet from what I understand from our land services because of sales that, you know, are driven it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak? Anybody else? Okay, then I guess we'll close that portion of the meeting.
Thank you all for coming. I can just shut this down. That go-to me is kind of lonely tonight. Okay. Oh, Bob Cornelius is here. All right, I believe the next item is that the BEP Services Agreement?
Yes.
Okay, so we talked about this when the fee schedule was reviewed, and basically, the purpose of this amendment is to allow the Benton Economic Partnership to assess certain fees when, for example, it's considering a loan application for tax increment financing, or tax abatement. The service agreement provides essentially that BEP is now doing this work that the county used to do. So it stands to reason that they should assess those fees in a manner that they deem appropriate and retain those to cover their costs of administering those programs on behalf of the county. So that's in essence what the amendment does, and Michelle Meyer was kind enough to draft this amendment for us, and BEP has considered and approved it already.
Okay. Any discussion, questions for Amanda's here?
It's pretty straightforward to me.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's very fair.
Okay.
I have to agree. Actually, I thank BEP for taking a lot of this off their hands.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Doing a great job. I'll make a motion
on
to,
yours.
I'll make a motion to, amend, or a proposal to amendment to Economic Development Services Agreement with the Benton County Economic Partnership.
Motion been made and seconded to consider the amendment to the Economic Development Service Agreement with BEP. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
All righty.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda.
Amanda. So, moving on to the Brown Intertech Environmental Assessment. So as we've discussed previously, there is a possibility that contaminated soils may be present on the side of the old Foley High School. We've obtained documentation from the owner, and Commissioner Johnson was also able to get documentation from his school. And of course, he was a witness to this, that there were buried fuel tanks on the site. Those were removed. But the documentation doesn't conclusively tell us that there are not contaminated soils there still. So it seems wise to move forward with some soil investigation work to conclusively tell us whether or not there are contaminated soils or not. So I obtained this proposal from Braun Intertech. We know Braun pretty well. They've done a lot of work for us over the years in highway with soil sampling for road projects. And so you have this proposal. I hope you've had a chance to read it. I was gonna just highlight a few items in it.
Yeah, please do.
I won't pretend to be an environmental expert, so I'll just if I could just highlight a few things that are here. Clearly that the largest cost is associated with the soil sampling. So Braun proposes to, looks like, install do 9 soil borings, and then do the analysis of that soil. And also, they propose to, let's see here, install 4 groundwater sampling wells to sample and test the groundwater. It looks like, as I understand this proposal, that we should see preliminary results from the soil and the water samples within about 2 to 3 months. They propose some longer-term sampling of the water, apparently to detect the presence of vapors from fuels. And that sampling would actually take about a year. But my impression from this proposal, though, is that we should know in fairly short order whether or not there is contaminated soil and water present on the site. I'm hopeful, frankly, then, that if we know that sooner, then the board can make a determination. Are you comfortable moving forward with the purchase of the property? I don't get the impression that you have to wait for a year until the longer-term vapor monitoring is done. But I guess we'll see, as Braun gets into it, well, I guess only time will tell. Once they get into the site and they see, we'll find out what they see.
Mr. Chair, if I could, Monty, first of all, thank you for putting this together. I gotta tell you, I'm a little bit torn on this because when I read it and I saw the dollar amount, I was actually shocked.
Okay?
I guess, I think you all know that I wanna get this thing rolling. Part of me says we need to do a little more due process here and get another number. That's just my
Get a second
opinion.
quote, okay?
I realize we don't have to, but I think it would do us all well to justify doing that.
Okay.
And just getting another number.
Totally
I
fine.
hate delaying it, but that's how I feel about it.
Mr. Chair, is this number higher because of the time of year we're doing it too?
I have no idea. I really, this is my first exposure to this kind of work. I don't know, in the 19 years I've been here, we've needed to do this kind of thing before. So,
Mr. Chair, if I could, Chris, I don't know if you've seen this or not. If you could speak to it at all, it just kind of shocked me a little bit, and maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, it's not surprising to me when you
Okay.
start talking about environmental things and everything that's required. They're gonna be testing for things that are set by national EPA and then further set by the Minnesota Department, or MPCA, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. If you want to do your due diligence, it may be beneficial to find another. I wouldn't expect anything dramatically different than what you see here and stuff. Looking
Okay.
through their cost estimate, their methods seem to be very typical. We don't do this all the time unless we know they're suspected. Sometimes it's required as part of federal funding. And yeah, the price does not shock me for what we've had to do in the past on projects. So
Okay, thank you for that, appreciate it. Monty, also, one other thing I was gonna ask you, did you ever have a chance to follow up with MPCA in regards to this file number? To see if they had any other,
I didn't personally.
any other further information? Cause there was a file number to it.
Right.
Remember in that letter, there was an actual number assigned?
Right. I did not personally, so.
I don't know, how's
would-
everybody else
would-
feel?
would
I
presu-
mean-
I would presume that our environmental firm will do that.
Okay,
They will make the inquiries of, I think that's what's covered under the so-called phase one.
Sure.
That's like the review of all the files, all the records.
okay.
Right, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think what you're getting at, Commissioner Johnson, is maybe there's something in this file that we haven't checked yet that would answer a lot of questions.
That's my question, I guess.
And,
is-
and before we take and sign this agreement with Braun Intertech, maybe we can check on that file to make sure the hidden gem isn't in there.
Exactly, I think it's a phone call.
It probably is, but the biggest question, did they do soil samplings?
Yep.
That's what's gonna tell everything,
Sure.
on
Well,
this project.
the document I got from Mr. Sabanis from a company called Apex gave no indication of any soil sampling occurring anywhere or monitoring wells. It was a rough sketch of where the tanks were.
I'm
That
trying to
was
recall the
essentially-
language in the MPCA letter, Monty. It seems like they referred to it as being a cleaned up site because that went through the Petro Fund. The dollars that were spent there.
Yeah.
So I just have a hard time believing the Petro Fund or anybody else would have just walked away from a contaminated site.
Especially with stopping it.
Yeah, they stopped the total demolition, so.
Well,
there
I
was a-
guess my interpretation of both documents, the one from the school and the one from Mr. Sabania, was that neither of them were conclusive. Neither of them ruled out the possibility that there could be contaminated soils on the site. My takeaway was that, well, it's possible. That was my takeaway from both of those documents. So, again, I think that's why we're here tonight is to try and nail this down. What exactly is there? Maybe Chris at some point can help me with another firm that does this kind of work, and we can get a second quote and build some confidence about this number.
Yeah, that's just my feeling on it. How's everybody else feel on it?
I got a question. So if we spend $28,000 here, what's it gonna cost to clean up? Or are we saying that we're gonna probably back away from this property?
Correct. Well, I don't know about that for sure, because is there still Petro Fund money available for cleanup?
Yeah.
That we may qualify for? I'd hate to say that just because it's contaminated, we're walking away. There may be funding for that.
And there is a lot of funding out there, a lot of grant funding for
So
that
I'd be a little hesitant to
operation.
say the red flag goes up if it's contaminated. My bigger concern was the dollar number after hearing Chris.
I would still like to see what's in that file. I'd be fine moving ahead with it, but after, could we do a conditional one with Monty making a call on that file first?
I guess my question would be has Mr. Sabani been contacted that we're gonna do this? Does he
Yes.
know? And he-
I asked his explicit permission to allow us, through our representative firm on site to do the soil sampling, and he agreed that that was okay. Yeah.
Okay, because, if it comes back not good for him, this is not gonna be good for him.
Oh,
I mean,
'cause technically, he would probably have
technically,
to clean that
I
up.
thought about, we should ask him to split half the cost, because,
Well, I think we can do that further on what we find too, though.
Yeah.
no, I meant to do this, to do the soil borings and that, but at this point, I don't know, because he's got probably way more to lose than we do.
I was going back and reading on the Braun Intertech proposal. If you see on page 2, task 2, it's the paragraph in the middle that says, electronic files for these 2 leak numbers have been requested from the MPCA. These files have not been provided us by this time. So and I had a conversation with the person that wrote this, and it appears that they've made the inquiry of MPCA for what Commissioner Johnson is suggesting. whatever records MPCA has on this site. So one option is I could contact my person at Brown and say, hey, did you get these and what did you see?
I don't know. Everybody else's thoughts.
Well, normally on this stuff, if MPCA gives it a clean bill of health, it's usually good, right?
Well, that was my,
But this is 20 years old.
this is 20 years old.
Which it only got better.
Well, yeah.
I personally would not go into an agreement with the seller not knowing if there
Right.
is something in.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with that.
Yeah.
I-
I mean, there's no.
We need to find this out.
You know, and this could be part of our ongoing negotiations too with the seller. You know,
Again, I'm just thinking back to the Apex letter. It said, it really left it open for the possibility that there could be contaminated soils. And it said, if I recall correctly, if you sort of build over the top and you don't disturb the soil,
you're fine.
you should be fine. But if you have to excavate through it, then you might get into contaminated soils. And I would think at that point, then there's a possibility you have vapors coming up into a structure. So, again, I wish those two documents were more conclusive, but
Yeah,
they just weren't.
I don't know. I guess,
Mr. Chair, Chris, do you think it's reasonable that we would be able to find somebody for another quote for our next meeting, the 28th? Is that even remotely possible, do you think?
Well, there's other companies out there for sure.
Could they bite on it that
Ron
fast?
probably took a couple weeks to prepare this for you, though.
They got pretty quick. I mean, I gave them a short turnaround time. They gave it to me in a few days. Yeah.
As I hear you discuss, it's some of the things you're asking for, I think, would be covered in a phase one. And I don't know if it's worth just, because that's a relatively small cost. You mentioned the
Right.
Petro Fund. I think that phase one analysis would reveal, did they do everything up to the point that exhausted any Petro Fund applicable costs? A lot of times when we do this, we go into the phase two because that's actually sampling and you're trying to calculate a volume of contamination that you're gonna have to deal with. When it comes to road projects, sometimes we need to weigh that cost with the cost of building the road in a different location, so we need to know those. You may gain a lot just from having them complete a phase one study and not moving forward with a phase two investigation. And maybe at that point, you can make the decision to look at other firms to do a complete phase two, or
And it looks like phase one is $2,400.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
not-
No.
that's,
if the board desires, I can provide Monty with some other names of some firms, turn around to get, I don't know, I mean, possibly they could turn around and get a proposal now.
I guess for time's sake,
Yeah.
let's do the phase one with Brown.
I got a quick question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Chris, on that phase one, so if I hear you right, basically what you're saying is in phase one, they might not find anything and like, okay, we don't even need to go into phase two because we're not trying to quantify what we have.
Yeah, that does happen when they're suspected. They may get to a point, and like Monty had mentioned, them requesting the files from the MPCA, they would do that. They may find something that there's a clean bill of health. It seems like there's a lot of unknowns whether the site was cleaned up or not. And I don't think those would be fully vetted out unless you complete the phase one.
Mr. Chair, now I got one more question, with doing these bids like this. Is this à la carte or are they expecting to get the whole project or is their number for phase one gonna go up if they only get that $2,400 piece? That would be a clarification, I think, with them.
To that question.
It's in bold, so it very well could be.
It does talk, it says we'll provide phase one services described herein as a lump sum for task one.
Correct.
And then phase two is also then
So
hourly and unit cost
am I hearing this
basis.
possibility that we might go ahead and do the phase one and then at that point, we'll take a timeout
Yeah.
and decide, do you want to do phase two then based upon what they find?
Yep.
And then I think it may behoove us at that point to, maybe then we get a secondary number for phase two.
Phase two, okay.
But I see what Commissioner Kapinski's saying is,
Will they accept that?
will they accept that? Because they may be doing that at a reduced.
They may go,
Right,
you know, they may go up a few $100 because they're looking at a whole project versus just a section.
Okay. Well, I can of course ask and see if they're agreeable to that.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah,
Of
thanks.
just doing the phase one at this point and then we'll pause and then the board would make a decision, do we want to move forward with phase two?
I would make a motion to approve phase one at $2,400. And, we'll stop there to a pause and
I'll second it.
Okay, motion been made and seconded. You heard the motion to do phase one. Stop and evaluate after that. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I,
Opposed? Carried.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay,
Monty.
I think the next one is the opioid settlement. And of course, y'all heard a ton about that down at the AMC conference. So I don't really need to go on too long about this. Let me just quickly add a couple things for the record. It looks like there's $21 billion nationwide that's going to be distributed over 18 years to states, counties, and cities for this. In Minnesota, they estimated $296 million over 18 years. Of that 296, $222 million for cities and counties. And distributions could start as early as April of next year. As you may have heard at AMC, it's not known exactly how much counties and cities will get specifically. As I read this, the amount that ultimately will come to Minnesota is somewhat a function of how many counties and cities sign on to the settlement.
Right.
And then they'll crunch the numbers according to some, apparently according to Julie Ring, an enormously complex formula, and then will tell us exactly how much we're supposed to get. It sounds like, as I read this information from the Attorney General's office, it must be used for opioid-related treatment and programs. And of course, counties do a lot of that kind of work. You know, one of our primary responsibilities in human services is chemical dependency treatment, detox, and so on. So I suspect we will have no trouble finding acceptable uses for those resources in human services. So basically, at this point, counties are asked to adopt this resolution that's in your packet to endorse the AMC negotiated opioid settlement. And then that empowers me to sign the various documents that I've been given. There's a memorandum of agreement, and there's a couple of other settlement documents that I'm to sign electronically. So I signed up to access this system electronically a long time ago. So I can take care of that part once the board acts. And the deadline to act is, I believe, January 2nd to endorse the settlement.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve a resolution to endorse the AMC negotiated opioid.
I'm gonna second that one.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adopt the AMC negotiated for opioid settlement. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thanks, Monty.
thanks, Monty.
Thank you, Monty.
Yep, thanks.
Maybe in the process you could send AMC a note thanking them for taking this on,
Yeah.
because I don't think we'd have gotten anywhere as close to this amount coming to
No.
county.
No.
Had it not been for them.
No.
There's Bob.
Hey, Bob.
Figure.
Talk about a big picture.
At this time, we'll recess the county board and turn it over to Human Services Board Chair Steve Heinen.
We'll call the Human Services Board to order. Is there anything to add to the agenda? Bob, do you have anything to add? No?
I do not.
Anybody else?
I'll move approval of the Human Services agenda.
Second?
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Consent agenda items 1 through 9. Does anybody want any one of these pulled? 1 through 9.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
1 through 9 is approved. Is there anything else in front of us, Bob? You have anything to
I'm
add?
gonna let you commissioners get out of here early tonight, so I have nothing more for you.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
At this time, we'll turn it over to the board chair. Commissioner Pop.
We'll reconvene the regular board meeting and we'll have Chris Bird.
Good evening.
Again.
So let me just bring up my files here. Somebody still, we still sharing?
There's no one else here. So you're fine.
Very good, that makes it easier for me. Well, before you today, I just wanted to bring up, that's not the right one, a discussion regarding speed limits. So I've had a few phone calls from some residents in the Rice area that are concerned with our speed limits. It seems like there may be a small community group getting together, and they would like us to look at the speed limits of our county roads coming into the city limits of Rice. And I attached a map. Two roads in specific are CASA 2 and CASA 12, kind of east side of Highway 10. What's out there currently, this is a map showing our CASA 2. This kind of shaded area is the city limits of Rice as it is today. Outside of the city limits of Rice, it's 55 miles an hour. And then here at the city limits, there is a 45 mile per hour speed limit sign. And then as you get around the corner here from, this is Fromelt Loop, just before you get to the hardware store, the speed limit reduces again to 30 miles an hour. Up here on the north, the speed limit of County Road 12 outside of Rice is 55 miles an hour, and there is no posted reduction. And it does come to a stop at this point when it intersects with County Road 21. So there is some concern that drivers are still driving in excess of the posted speed limit when they're coming into town. So I think ideally these residents would like to see lower speed limits posted on our county roads. So as part of the agenda item, I did attach what the Minnesota current statute is. This has been a topic of discussion at the legislature. There have been some changes recently to cities. Cities have recently been given the authority to set the speed limits themselves within their own jurisdictions. That does not apply to us as a county road. There are some statutory speed limits, as maybe many of us know. Most of our roads fall under this category here, where it's 55 miles per hour, because we're not we don't have interstate highways. We don't have any non-interstate expressways. We don't have urban districts as it's defined by law. And we don't have residential roadways as defined by law either. So most of our speed limits are 55 miles an hour. Although there does offer an opportunity for a change in that speed limit, and that's spelled out here in subdivision 5. That when we believe that a speed limit needs to be altered from the statutory speed limit, we can request the Commissioner of Transportation, so in other words, MnDOT, to perform a traffic engineering speed study to determine if a different speed limit is warranted. Kind of the catch or caveat to that, though, is if they come back and say that the speed limit is different than what is currently posted, we have a statutory obligation to post those new speed limits. It's not always a reduction. There have been cases where they look at the roadway, they look at the features and say, oh, this has been posted for years as 30 miles an hour. It's actually more appropriate as 45 miles an hour. And that's where it causes a rift sometimes between counties and cities. That city would ultimately like to see a reduction. Then the county, though, is obligated by statute to post those higher speed limits.
With it, Chris, within the city limits or just?
Yeah, because that applies to the county
If it's county
road.
road.
Interestingly enough, Rice on their own city streets has some different statutes within the same statute number that they can apply and set speed limits as they wish.
Mr. Chair, both these county roads would be CASA roads, correct? So does
Correct.
that matter versus a county road?
Not in our case. It would still go through the same process.
Okay.
So if the board does desire to have this looked at, how that process works is the board would adopt a resolution, and then I would send that on to MnDOT for them to complete that engineering study. With that being said, I think we all kind of remember, it wasn't too long ago, actually 2014, when that Rice interchange was constructed. And even though they were redesigning that whole configuration of that interchange, for have them to, as part of their design work, to look at that, we had to adopt a resolution asking them to look at the speed limits on our roads. So I just want to point that out, that these were technically looked at and considered in 2014, and that's what resulted in the speed limits as they are posted today. If we were to ask them, we certainly can. There's no cost to the county. The only cost would be time. It's not a quick turnaround process. But I would not anticipate the speeds to change from what they're being posted, what they're currently posted at in this case.
Mr. Chair? This is similar to what happened in my road on 10th Street. And it took a few calls to the city. And there was cops there pretty much around the clock. And I happened to be one of them that was a little bit quick on the foot pedal. I just happened to be going to a fire call, but
That's an excuse.
not really. But they posted on that road for about a month, and that slowed traffic extremely down. I'm just wondering if we couldn't get with Sheriff Heck to talk with the police chief and Rice to start patrolling that, sitting in those areas, because if there's police presence, there's going to be slower traffic, and people will start getting used to that.
We've just heard, I mean, it's been even on the news. I mean, speeds across the state have increased. Fatalities are up on our roads. Just from an engineering standpoint, just posting a speed limit sign with a lower or different speed limit doesn't always gain compliance. It needs some positive reinforcements, let's say.
In your personal opinion, do you think we have a risk of it going up in speed? Because it steps down twice, right?
Yeah, I don't think we're at risk of it going up. I just don't think it would change.
Okay.
Even having them look at it. I know traffic's always increasing on this road. It does seem like there's more development to the north of here. I don't remember what that neighborhood's called. And what we're hearing is more people are wanting to get out and walk along our road. To me, that tells me that we need to still work on reconstructing that roadway and reconstruct it with wide shoulders and those kinds of things.
Chris, on the county road too, I don't know where the township line is on that, but I think there's several businesses that are located in the township.
You may be correct.
I think that's where the problem is, that there's a quite a fair number of trucks going in and out of there, and cars swing around the trucks, and
Yeah, we have the church here. Is the street here? Because I'm trying to remember. I think this lot we see here is Bursky Construction now.
Bursky, and then there's the Boat Works, and
Yeah,
there's a
Boat
couple
Works
other
has
things.
recently moved
And,
in here.
and Fox Meadows there has grown to the point where it's almost full.
I think law enforcement would tell you, if the speed limit sign is right here, you're supposed to be at 45 miles an hour at this point. You should be decreasing through here.
Yeah.
So some of us like to argue, well, we don't need to start slowing down until we see the speed limit sign. But I think technically by the letter of the law, you should be at 45 miles an hour at this point.
Yep.
If, and then it's 45 right all the way through there.
45
the
until you get
hardware
around
store.
the corner until about in here, then it drops to 30.
Okay.
And then you're coming up to the stop condition
And
here.
I think part of it is that we go from 55 to 45 to 30. And I know I've been at the hardware store, and holy manners, they're just a clip in there,
Yeah.
And that's enforcement, that's not us.
Right.
And when you go on County Road 12, there's really nothing there that says they should slow down prior to
Yeah.
getting to the deal. I think the city could go out there and put a 30-mile-an-hour speed way out of town, because you'd be surprised how many people have to get in the middle of coming out of the McDonald's there, and they're like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, that 12 though is technically 55 until you come to the
Yeah,
stop.
and that needs to change, the city limits run quite far out on 12.
Right, it's that shaded area, correct, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, they go,
It may even
almost to
be
that,
outside of this
to
map
that,
area.
to that Little Rock Creek, they go almost, is where the city limits start.
But they could enforce
Turn back.
56 mile an hour and write a ticket,
Turn
or
back,
60
and
miles
then
an
they
hour.
could post it.
Even that stretch, I don't see as much has changed since 2014 on that. It's still a rural section.
Chris,
I do know that they want two lowered, just because of the truck traffic, people going around before they get to the city limits, they're going around
Yeah.
trucks that are turning, and,
Just anecdotally, I know my experience has been for almost every person that wants the speed lowered,
Somebody wants
so
it
somebody wants it raised. That's why, I think that's why the process has stayed for counties, that it's not housed here. It's not your decision whether it's raised or lowered. Recently, we've Golden Plump, we know, drives a lot of trucks in here, and their corporate headquarters has somehow tuned into their GPS, and drivers get dinged for driving too fast in here. So we've heard some complaints from even drivers that they think the speed's too low. Although they're the ones that the residents are concerned about sometimes.
Mr. Chair? Hypothetically, I mean, we talked about turnbacks. If this was turned back to the city, they could actually post this then, right? At the speeds that they want?
Yeah, but the fact that it's a CASA road makes that a little bit more complicated. If it was just a county road, we could probably do some things like that.
Two runs right through the middle of Rice, so we're not gonna turn that back.
Yeah.
I think we should be more concentrating on the violation part of it and letting the
Well, yeah,
city.
on 12, that would be a good idea, but on 2, that's not gonna help. That's not gonna help the problem where the people are in the Pines, west of the church. And, that's where they're coming from, the complaints. And then Fox Meadows has got a road coming out of there that comes out. And
This is specifically what I heard, yeah, residents in this area, they like to walk.
and
using
they
2
come
as
out.
a loop
yeah.
to come all the way around. And
See, they can't get out coming right into the Rice. They gotta go down to 2 to get out or go out to Township Road. And Township Road is on the east side of McDonald's. So I don't think 12, I think 12, we could just tell the city to lower that speed limit further out. But on 2, I think 2 warrants some kind of a study to see if, with the number of housing, number of traffics, and the number of trucks.
Well, either one would need adopt a resolution and have the state traffic engineer complete the speed study. If that's the desire of the board, what I would do is I would go ahead and draft up a resolution and bring it back as a consent item, if that's the direction the board wanted me to go in.
Can you split them up that way, Chris? Just one of them instead of both?
I will probably just mirror what we did back in 14. It listed all these roads, CASA 2, 12, and
Okay.
22. I may just do the kind of reword it a little bit and
Sure.
try to look for things that might have changed since 2014. I don't know, other than just general traffic volume increase, which all of our roads are kind of experiencing. There hasn't been a lot of, I know we talked about Bursky and the boat works, but it's not like a big box stores moved in that's dramatically increased. It's just been small percentage increases for the last 5-6 years, so.
Doesn't cost us anything, might as well do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
If that's the direction consent, I will do that. I was going to just mention, since this has been a topic statewide, there is a website, MinnesotaSpeedLimitVision.org, that talks about this. As engineers, we're trying to look at the way speed limits are determined and see if there's a better way to determine speed limits. This is just a PDF of that, but if anybody's curious on how speed limits are set, it used to be very dependent on what we call the 85th percentile, 85% of the drivers driving a certain speed. But they also look at terrain and topography, features around the roadway and stuff, and try to determine the best speed limit. So it is still generally safest if everybody's generally going the same speed. When you have these big speed differentials, like you have people wanting to go 35 miles an hour and other people are still going 55, that's when it creates unsafe conditions. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay.
All right, that's all I had on that subject then.
Mr. Chair, one quick question while Chris is up here. The bridges are complete, I assume?
Yes, they are installed, open to traffic. The projects are not 100% complete. There'll be some permanent seating still need to occur next spring.
Okay.
80, that was a paved road before the bridge replacement. We were not able to get pavement back down. So it is a gravel surface, but 50 is back to gravel. Once again, permanent seating in the spring, and then that'll be 100% complete.
Great,
So,
thank you.
Gotta keep those bridges going,
Got to keep them open.
As long as we keep getting funding, it ain't so bad.
makes it easier.
Commissioner meeting updates.
I can start. I had two of them that I remember of, because it's been so long since we've been here. One was, the Benton County Historical Society. They're still moving forward on remodeling that house, and they hope to be done by March. And then the other one, is Career Solutions. We had our annual board meeting and elected officers. And of course, they elected me as chair again. So,
Congratulations.
That's what you always needed.
yeah, yeah. Well, we've been working very heavily with Deed, me and Tammy, so there's a lot going on and more to come that we'll find out in January or February. That's it.
Okay, I'll go next. We had a Benton Economic Partnership meeting I stepped in on. That was very beneficial. We went over the Crow Wing. They got the same kind of partnership at Crow Wing, and it was a great presentation that Amanda had those guys put on. They actually have a recruiting department in their development, economic development partnership. So they hired an internal recruiter that recruits people for the county, as well as businesses that are a part of their economic development. So I thought that was very solid, and I urged them to try and maneuver a plan to see if we can get there, because I think that would be beneficial for the county as well as our businesses that are part of that. Obviously, we've all were at AMC. That was for a new commissioner, that was a lot to take in. So it was definitely a good time and learned a lot. Then I went right into the MICA meeting on Wednesday, which I'm not gonna lie, I was burnt out. So we had MICA meeting, 1 o'clock on Wednesday, and it was basically repetitious of what was going on, other than the fact that everybody's looking at the $7.7 billion surplus. It's actually 8.9%, or 8.9 billion dollar surplus. So they've got 1.2 billion that is unappropriated of the ARPA money.
And our
So-
business taxes are going up.
Yeah, so,
Figure that one out.
yeah, there was quite a few of us that were there's a few people that stepped in and wanted extra positions, a lot of services, and Felix was pretty boisterous on that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he didn't hold back. So, he definitely doesn't want anything that isn't, gonna be taken care of after this, added to the benefit, or
That's
to
always
the
a problem.
budget. We had, our broadband meetings, things are moving forward there. We got some stuff back. Chris took care of, getting SCH's number in. So we were gonna add that. I'll put that under commissioner concerns when we talk there. Other than that should be
We're gonna
about
get
it.
fiber in the ground pretty soon?
Not this year, but, no, not this year.
Do we need to buy the fiber pretty quick, or are we gonna?
We're gonna be talking about that. I'm actually getting pricing from vendors right now to find out what it's going to be. Obviously, there's a threshold that we gotta be under in order for,
Yeah.
so we don't have to go out to public bid. But even if we did go out to public bid, that's not a big deal either. It just takes a couple of weeks. Monty and I talked about this. If we go out to public bid, it adds 2 weeks roughly. And
Yeah, I think typically you publish maybe 10 days. I have to look at that. I think it's 10 days. at
You know,
least.
so,
And, we'd wanna push it out to prospective vendors so they get a hold of it quickly.
yeah,
Shorten that timeframe.
but you're right. I know Commissioner Heinen brought this up too, but we definitely want to try and get in front of the bus on this one and get fiber, because this is a need throughout the country, not just
Yeah,
here.
and then you can about imagine how long you're gonna wait later on in life.
Yep.
Right.
So I know about a month and a half ago, I checked with vendors and a couple of them still had supply.
Okay.
So I think it would be smart to purchase it up front. I think that's all I got.
Commissioner Johnson?
All right, I get to be the long-winded one tonight. I actually had quite a handful of meetings. I've got about 5 pages here, so I'm gonna really try to summarize it as quickly as I can. So back on November 17th, we had our first Mississippi One Watershed One plan held at the St. Cloud Library, which was just a treat. So it went on for a couple hours, but to really shorten it down, again, it was just a preliminary meeting. Bowser's really looking at getting a work plan and grant agreement in by March of next year, so that'll continue to be worked on. Tri-County Solid Waste, Commissioner Pop and I attended a tour of the Pope Douglas burner back on November 18th, spent the day out in Alex, and then after the tour, we had our Tri-County Solid Waste board meeting. Just a couple quick updates from that. There is discussion at the legislature about some solar panel disposal and what's coming up with that. I know that's a concern, and we've talked about that with our solar gardens. We are looking at another tour coming up either at the Blaine or the Minneapolis material recycling facility, so we've got to decide on that. Quick ag plastic update, Waste Management ended their contract with Tri-County back in May of this year, and they're currently working on trying to get a contract in place, I think, with West Central. Yeah. They're basically doing kind of the majority of the west half of the county. We really need somebody to get over here. So that's in process too. And just to note, Tri-County does cover the pickup and the delivery of those dumpsters, so that's good. The executive director from Pope Douglas is also requesting a 4% tipping fee increase from the previous year's, as I would call it, a ledge calculation for their net profit or their net cost of operations. I think it was brought up at our board meeting, their Pope Douglas financial statements, and actually I'd like to review this with Monty going forward, but they're showing a $784,000 net profit, and within there is a $1.1 million transfer. So those questions got brought up with still, here we are a month later with no answers.
We just talked about this down at AMC too. They
Yes.
still didn't.
We still don't have an answer.
They were gonna get us answers that day.
Yeah, they're still trying to, and then they're trying to call a meeting this Friday for the board to get together and approve this. Now, mind you, the current contract has built in a 2% contract increase each year, I believe, and through 2030?
2031.
2031, okay. So they're requesting an additional 4%. My question is, showing a net profit and a $1.1 million transfer in your books. So anyways, hopefully we're gonna get some answers on that.
Wasn't there one that held it for like 10 years too?
The contract holds it at a 2% increase.
Yeah, I
each
know,
year.
but there was somebody down there that got their contract held for 5 years or 5 or 10 years.
What, AMC you're
Yeah.
talking? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Somebody, yeah.
I have a feeling, I mean, contractually, I think if the Tri-County Board doesn't come to an agreement with this, we'll be in arbitration with them, so that may be coming up. Tri-Cap, made the mistake of asking a question and found myself now on their finance committee. So I met with Executive Director Lori Schultz and the Tri-Cap Executive Board Treasurer Steve Notch from Stearns County. Him and I and Lori met for an hour a few weeks ago and reviewed their fiscal policies and their internal control manual. So that was good information. Took us an hour to get through it, but we got that done. Again, then on December 3rd, received multiple phone calls and discussions about wetland issues in the city of Foley's orderly annexation area. There's a number of properties that are looking at being sold, and one of those is also looking at having a business come in on it. And I think the gist of it is that between the city, the landowners, Gilmanton Township, they aren't aware of the wetland procedures. And so tried to talk with Sierra Cotter at length and tried to encourage her to meet with Sarah Brunn, the city administrator, Gilmanton Township, the OIA people with the joint powers, Roxanne hopefully included, even these landowners, and actually invited them to the TEP meeting that happened when we were at AMC, so the Technical Evaluation Panel, to talk about wetland issues and kind of guide them on what the steps are, because you know how it is, we go through this whole process and all of a sudden the red flag goes on wetland. Well, instead have that flag come up front when the discussion's starting instead of all this time and effort put into it. So hopefully those parties are getting together and taking a look at that, so. We talked a little bit about our planning commission meeting the other night. We looked at that plat tonight. We also had a renewal of an interim use permit for Saldana's gravel pit up in Granite Lynch Township. Again, I made a comment that night, as a very well-run facility, and that really makes our job as a planning commission easier when we don't have to worry about all the conditions being followed, because they're doing that. That also led into some discussion about timelines in the future for IUPs for gravel pits. This particular company, and she shared her concerns, they have plans down the road to pass or sell their business off to their family. And of course, when they go in for financing, the bankers have a little hard time with a 5-year permit. And so I think what's gonna get brought back to planning commission for discussion and maybe some change down the road is maybe that number will be 10 or 15 years. With that, though, staff would have the ability every maybe 5 years to just review their file and make sure everything's, the conditions are being met, no complaints, et cetera, et cetera. So you're gonna be hearing more about that, I think, coming up, because it's a concern with some of these gravel pits wanting to pass their businesses on.
Yeah, so you might wanna check into, I know the Helgeson pit, I was sitting on those boards too back then, Sauk Rapids Township, I think it was. We started out with 5 years and then we did go to 10 or 15.
Okay.
So that's another resource to look at.
And again, that's something that's changed in the last 10 to 15 years.
Right.
We used to issue them as conditional use permits, and so they went with the property, right?
Yep.
Well, that got changed to interim use permits, so there's a sunset date on that, and that's what's triggering this all the time. We also, one of the other big discussions on the planning commission meeting was, we actually, and we don't do this very often, but we looked at a revocation of a conditional use permit. There's some property out on County Road 4, right before the Mayhew Lake, Brett Ogg's property. One of the conditions is not to be filling wetlands, parking equipment on that, et cetera, and so he's in that process of trying to get that fill removed and removed to a spot in his site that's out of the floodplain. And so with that and with this warm weather coming tomorrow, we felt it was appropriate to kind of table that revocation look and give him the opportunity to get this finished. Again, the planning commission's only dealing with the conditional use permit issue, not the issues he has with the DNR and all these other type of things. So we did table that until the January meeting, and hopefully he's gonna be able to come back and say, yeah, we got that done. It's never fun to have to
No.
revoke a conditional use permit if you don't have to. And finally, Tri-County Extension. Commissioner Pop and I also on that board, and I think the gist of that is, there's continued discussion about adding a 4th local extension educator to the team, basically with a couple small farms, local foods, irrigation. Sherburne County had indicated some desire to maybe join our tri-county force, but I think the short answer to that is that that's probably not gonna happen at this time. We were a little concerned, cause at the time they were looking at joining us, they kinda had a 3-2 board on that, and so we were a little nervous about them maybe coming in and not really being sold out on getting involved with us on that, so. But sounds like they've made the decision to step away.
And the biggest problem was they wanted to change the memorandum of agreement.
Yeah, they
all
wanted to change
87
our
counties.
MOA.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, they're not, University of Minnesota is not very happy with Sherburne County thinking that they are above everybody else to have a different memorandum of agreement.
So I think in the long run, it's probably gonna be best.
Yeah, I think, so we have to decide on what we're gonna do with excess funds if we're gonna go forward. But they are still desperately trying to get it done yet.
Okay, well, so the final decision hasn't been made.
I don't know.
Well, there you go, it changes every other day, so, thank you, that's all I have.
Yeah. Thanks for,
Good job.
he took care of a lot of mine, so you won't hear much from me. Beth?
I had the RSVP Advisory Council, and there was some turnover in, board members. And then they're working on, they did their financial reports and volunteer recruitment, and, some work they're doing on the east side to work with the Boys and Girls Clubs. They're having, member socials, an east side group promotion, and coordinating on getting some volunteers to work over there. And then they have their, the Whitney Times promotes them also and asks
Oh,
for
yeah.
volunteers and things and gives all the projects they're working on, and very busy group. Then the people at the place, they make little decorations and cookies, and they made pies for us this time. So, really nice group to Yeah.
Okay. That's it? Oh,
Well,
So-
I was on a few others that had been mentioned. so-
okay. I guess one of the big things, I had library board way back on the 16th. The reserves are shrinking.
Nice.
No, the year-end reserves, we were projected to take about 200,000 move forward to 2023's budget, and I think we've lost about half of that.
Why?
Where are they going?
They didn't have that answer yet. But we've got a really good finance director, she will get it to us. No, she will not pass the buck.
That was a lot of dollars.
What?
That was a lot.
Yeah, well, no, not the total reserves, just the year end.
Oh, okay.
Just the year, we were looking at maybe 225,000, and now they're down, pushing around 100,000 that we'll be able to move forward with. But it does affect, 2023's budget. I guess that was it. Are gonna get some new, we had a couple of them that was their last board meeting, cause we don't have one in December, so we have, gonna be looking at a couple of new board members. Commissioner from Todd County has spent his 9 years on the board, and he said that he's got 1 year left on the county board, and that's it, he's hanging her up. So, but that staff over there does a really good job, and, and there again, some of the reentry or the reopeners for benefits and that went on, and that's gonna cause a little bit of more, less reserves coming forward, but we still, we still got the 8 million or whatever we're sitting there with, that we can do. And then again, I had Tri-County and some other things that with Scott Johnson, that was really good. I wanna thank Scott for some of the good questions he asked there about the finance, cause most people did not catch that. $1 million transfer that went somewhere. We don't know where. And that was about all that I had. And again, AMC had a lot of good things.
Good.
I was going
Yep.
for them. I think AMC does a really good job. I did have, at AMC, the request that if Benton County would be interested in joining the rural county caucus. It's 35 counties and they're basically west. They kinda like to the north, come down, they kinda make a horseshoe. Stearns County is not in it, I understand they're considering it. Then they pull a little bit further to the east and head down to the Iowa border. I didn't get there in time, I was gonna attend their meeting. Somebody says before you join, you might wanna attend a meeting or two. And I know Commissioner Paschal always attended them. But we've never had, doesn't come with a really big increase. It's nothing like, Micah, and I said, well, we already belong to Micah, and they told me, yeah, so does Otter Tail, so, but they are looking for us to maybe be part of their rural county conference, and, the 3/4 of Benton County, when you get away from the river, is rural, very rural, and they deal with more rural issues, so there may be some benefits there, I don't know, we'll have to discuss that at a later date. But yeah, there was a lot of good things went on at AMC. And the rest, Scott covered everything, so I think we're good there. Commissioner concerns.
Mr. Chair, we kind of brought up the SEH deal today. I think maybe if we can try and put that, would be opposed to putting it on the cow or right after Roxanne? Have a special meeting to get that approved?
That's always possible. You can have a special meeting with just 3-day posted notice.
I suppose there's nothing wrong with waiting until our next board meeting, but
Well, Commissioner Kapinski, are you looking for consensus to move ahead with SEH and then get a contract approval like on our 20th?
yes. To get at least a contract coming from them.
I see.
Yeah.
So we can act on the
It's
28th.
exactly. That would be my goal.
So could we put that as a question or an item on our upcoming cow?
Yeah.
It's just a quick discussion on,
Absolutely, right,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we'll do that on Monday?
Yeah.
20th, yeah,
Yep.
sure. Discuss the whole fully,
Yep.
fiber
Yep.
project.
Yep.
Okay.
Chris, you good with
I
that?
would probably recommend that Chris go ahead and begin work on an agreement with SEH to get that ball rolling. Yeah, we just go ahead and
I agree.
get that going, yeah.
yeah, I'd really like to act on that, I think the 28th.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly, then you position to vote on it 28th.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Is that good
That
enough for you?
was, that was all I needed.
All right. Set committee of the whole designate meetings.
So as we noted, you've got that one on the 20th at 10, but we'll amend that one to start at
Correct.
9. And the topics then would be Land Services Organization, Floyd St. Cloud Fiber, and then Human Services. Those three topics would be, and start at 9. And again, we would be in the Human Services third floor conference room.
And we'll do everything there.
Just do it all there?
Yeah, rather than bouncing back and forth.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
Let's go there.
Yep,
Yeah.
no problems.
You can attend, Chris?
On Monday?
Yep.
20th,
Okay.
and that's all we had for cows.
Anybody have anything else they wanted to set?
No.
Need a motion?
Motion to approve the cow.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried. We'll now have ditch authority.
We gotta adjourn this meeting first.
Adjourn this.
No, do we?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to adjourn the regular meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
I thought we always adjourned when we were all done with ditch.
You gotta approve an agenda.
You gotta call it to order. Ready, Chris?
I'm ready,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll call the Benton County Ditch Authority to order. Approve or amend the agenda.
I have nothing to add.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the
Second.
agenda.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve or amend the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So approve or amend the minutes of the Tuesday, September 7th meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve those minutes.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded to approve the minutes of February, September 7th. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Discussion on tree clearing during a ditch repair request.
All right, as just noted, it's been a few months since we've had a ditch authority meeting, maybe a little warning. Ditch activity is gonna pick up. We've kinda got to the end of our redetermination of benefits process. I received reports just on Friday and some more reports just yesterday. So I foresee having a ditch authority item every board meeting from here on for the foreseeable future. So, as we start to move forward with some of these repair projects, I'm starting to see the need for maybe some policy type guidance. And that brings us to the discussion we have today. Because we want to get to the point where we're repairing ditches. And so as we start to look at some of our ditches, we know that they have not been repaired in some time. And there's trees that have grown up. So we got a couple options. We want to be able to clean out the ditch. And so what I've included as part of the agenda item is like a typical detail of what would be included in a set of repair plans that we'd go out for bid for a contractor. We want to get ditches back to kind of this upside trapezoidal shape. There'll be a width ditch bottom. There'll be slopes 1-to-1, maybe 2-to-1. We'll have some spoil piles at the top. Important thing to note is when we get done with these ditches, we will, as a ditch authority, will have a responsibility to inspect and make sure that landowners adjacent to the ditches are maintaining this 16.5-foot buffer zone. And that's measured from the top of the bank out 16.5 foot, not from the center of the ditch or from the bottom. So some of these ditches travel through some wooded areas that have grown up over a number of years. It hasn't been replaced or repaired. We know that we will need to probably remove trees. If it's going through a wooded area, the need will arise that we'll have to remove trees at least on one side of the ditch. And that's basically to allow, an excavator or a backhoe to be on one side of the ditch to be able to dip down and clean out the sediment. And so everything within this trapezoidal shape, as an engineer, I would recommend that we remove all trees and shrubs in this area. And then, at a minimum, remove all trees as necessary to complete that repair. It wouldn't be necessarily required to remove trees on both sides of the ditch. Maybe a benefit of doing that, though, is as it was explained to me, maybe there's a reduced risk of deadfall. If you have trees on both sides, it's just double the chances of trees dying or beavers getting in there and using the trees to block up the ditch again. A negative aspect of cleaning on both sides is that is additional cost to the ditch system, which gets assessed back to the landowners. So just a consideration. You'll see this is our consultant that we've hired to start looking at our ditches with us. Conversations I had with them is typically when they've been part of repair projects, they'll specify, one side of the ditch or the other to remove trees between like road crossings. I'm thinking of County Ditch 6 as one of the first ones we'll probably get to. We have either a county road or a township road every mile along that ditch. We might be able to say, okay, between this road and this road, we'll clean all trees within that 16.5-foot buffer on the south side or the north side. Unless it's a desire of the board and that's why I'm saying a policy decision that maybe I'll apply to all the ditch repair projects going forward. Is that something we want to say, nope, our Benton County ditch cleaning policy is like we want to remove trees from both sides of the ditch. So, kind of a history there while I'm throwing out something to consider. Not necessarily something that has to be decided today. I will be bringing, if we don't reach a consensus, I'll bring it back before we complete repair plans on ditches to look at it.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, Chris, so obviously it costs a lot more money to do both sides. Let's just say it's my property that's going through. That doesn't necessarily matter. It's the total cost of the total repair to the ditch. Then that calculation's divided out amongst all the benefiters of the ditch system.
Yeah.
So it's not like that property owner who's got all the trees on the ditch is gonna be assessed the heavy amount.
Correct. Yep.
It's based on his benefit.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify how that was gonna work.
Yeah. Good. Clear.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would imagine that they're not gonna wanna be jumping back and forth too, say this landowner wants the trees gone, this landowner doesn't. They're not gonna be bouncing back and forth on each side of the ditch to keep digging.
I mean, they'll do whatever we tell them, but that'll usually be reflected in their bid
Yeah.
price. What they would probably do, just say this side, they have their excavator, they're dipping, they'll clean out all the way along that mile stretch, and then they'll have to walk their machine back. Maybe different even machines. Maybe that's a dozer or something to push all the trees back.
Mr. Chair, I'm inclined to clean out both sides.
To
do it.
Oh, okay.
Get them both done. That's my opinion.
The part when Chris had called me and we talked about this is that we got some of these ditches that go through people that have bought this for hunting land, and they really don't want that cleaned out, the trees cleaned out all the way. And I guess
You're talking 16 feet though.
I know.
Yeah, a lot of people put
We have a
deer
lot of them
stands
that
right
are-
on the,
Now,
then the deer travel the.
Yeah, and we had a lot of people that were were against cleaning the ditch in general, like on 13 and 15.
Right.
Because they were from the Twin Cities and they had hunting land and they
well, I
didn't wanna-
understand, but
yeah.
we've come to the agreement that we're gonna clean
They're
county
all
ditches.
ditches, yeah.
So.
But we're gonna clean them, whether we, I don't know. like-
Would let me ask you this, Commissioner Kapinski or Commissioner Pop, would those same people be upset that all the spoils went to one side? Because that's what's gonna happen if you clean half the ditch. I mean, half of the,
Take the trees down
So-
half on one side.
Yeah. So Chris, I got another question. So if we're running through farmland, we allow the contractor to contact the landowner to see if he wants those spoils spread out onto the property, correct?
Yeah, generally, statute allows you to put your spoil piles within the area that was used for original construction. We kind of, as a general rule of thumb, say, well, let's keep it within 16.5 feet, unless that adjacent landowner would want to incorporate that into their farmland. Barring that they're not filling any wetlands. We don't want to be promoting filling of wetlands. But if they have some upland area that they can use it, yeah, we've allowed that on other.
I mean, we're not gonna haul it a quarter mile.
May I ask a question, Chris?
Sure.
So, let's just say, for example, all the trees from the top of the ditch back 16.5 feet are removed with the dozer. Would the landowner then have the responsibility to reestablish the buffer with proper vegetation at that point? Would it be the landowner's responsibility?
Well,
or the ditch authority?
very good question. As part of our repair project, we would have to plant some kind of perennial grass in there.
Okay.
And then that becomes our maintenance responsibility is to inspect that area, that there is, perennial vegetation, that's not being used for cropland. And the idea is kind of to.
Our decision to remove that and clear it off does not create additional costs for that adjacent landowner then, to reestablish the buffer.
No, we would still make that part of the project. So that's just another thing. I mean, we would have essentially double the seeding cost in as well. I mean, if there's trees planted, we wouldn't get so worried about the buffer strip, because we would kind of assume that the trees there, if it's at least 16.5 foot, they're not going to be planting that, and you've got that as the stabilization. That's kind of the main reason.
If there's a big stand of trees, that effectively is the buffer then.
Correct. That would be the buffer then.
Mr. Chair? I mean, when you start, 16 feet is from this wall to where this drops down over here. You start looking at that 16 feet on each side, then you got whatever the middle is. Well, how far is the middle? I mean, you're talking some significant removal at times.
What, I'm trying to envision, so if we've got trees on both sides, we're gonna say we're only gonna do half.
Yep.
All the spoils come to the other half, and you've got a berm along the whole property line sitting in the trees. I don't know how people would react to that.
And is it hang over the 16 feet or actually in the 16 feet?
As far as like the trunk, I would
Yeah.
say if the trunk is within that 16.5 feet, we'd probably, but if we're right at 16.5 feet, maybe we don't. Less than 16.5 feet, we go ahead and remove it. One rule of thumb is maybe it's even less than that. Write the plans to say only what's necessary to complete and kind of force the contractor to remove less. It is easier maybe from a construction management standpoint to say, we're removing everything from 16.5 feet. That's easy for us to inspect and say, pull a tape measure, yep, they got out of the trees.
I think it's kind of a mute issue, because most of the people that request ditch clearing are agricultural people that want the drainage, that want it cleaned on both sides, and they're not gonna be happy with one side. You will have a select group of people that says, yeah, this is good, let's just clean one side. But I don't think there's enough of them out there that we should.
Well, and I wanted to bring that one step further, Chris, because you touched on it a little bit at the beginning. If I understood you correctly, let's just say we did both sides, so you've got 33 feet of top plus your ditch. That 33 feet of top, those landowners are responsible to maintain that, or we are? We don't want to come back in 10 years and do it all over again, so it's gonna be maintained, correct?
Yeah, so
And who's doing that?
A good question. So we have a responsibility to make sure that there is. If there's a violation, say they till it up one year and they plant soybeans in there, then
Yep.
we're supposed to write them a violation, and a couple ways. The enforcement action is they correct it themselves, or we come in and we hire somebody to plant hay or something, and then we assess that specifically back to the landowner.
Who's keeping the tree growth out? Who's doing that? So we're not back doing this again. Does that question make sense? Who's
Yeah.
maintaining this?
Yeah, so that would be a drainage authority maintenance cost that
Okay.
theoretically would be assessed back once again to everybody.
Because is that our long-term thing here, is that we're gonna develop some type of maintenance plan so that
Yes.
a board from 30 years from now isn't sitting here like we are,
Yeah.
having to fix this problem.
Yes.
That's why we're gonna have, what do they call it, an assessment? Maintenance
Maintenance
assessment.
plan, yeah.
Okay.
So, because what's happening is these landowners are going to probably feel like a big assessment once we complete this project. But once we pay off this repair project, I'd like to think that there's a lot smaller assessment that over time we're building up this fund, and then we as a drainage authority someday in the future, a ditch inspector says, "Yeah, we have trees that have fallen down and are blocking this ditch. Can you authorize us drawing from that ditch fund and get that repaired and opened back up?" And then we don't have to worry about increasing assessments for anybody.
Right.
And those ditch funds will be designated to each particular ditch.
Yeah, in our accounting system, we do have accounts set up for each numbered
ditch.
ditch.
Okay.
A lot of them right now, and as noted in the financial reports, they're negative, they're zero balances or negative
Right.
balances. We haven't.
Yeah, and we're in a way different situation today than what we were 20, 30 years ago when, a lot of these ditches with good drainage, everybody knows what good drainage and what kind of crops you can grow. They're gonna keep this ditch in line this time around because we're not gonna be in the 60s, 70s, when there was, crop prices and.
Sure.
There's, land is scarcer, there's more value to getting every dollar you can out of it. So I think we're in a lot better situation today than we were.
Well, I'm glad to hear there's consensus about we're not only gonna do this, we're going to maintain it.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I'm inclined, we try and direct, or the government tries to direct everything. I think we need to use a little common sense here and let them do what they need to do in order to clean the ditch. You know what I mean? If they don't need to take out a bunch of trees that the landowner either wants or doesn't want, if the landowner wants them taken out, maybe they can be assessed that or pay for that on the other side. But if we keep the ditch costs down by doing what removal they have to do to get it done the way it should be, so it's equal on all sides, then if something needs to be taken out after that the landowner wants, it's cheaper for them to get it done right then.
Sure.
And then they just pay for that additional.
How does that mess with the policy you're requesting though? I mean, I kinda heard you say you'd like a blanket policy.
Yeah, and maybe we won't get there. Maybe we still have to look at it ditch by ditch. I'm thinking of future ditches as we get closer to Sauk Rapids. That may be entirely different type of landowners, and maybe we apply something different.
Sure.
So,
Mr. Chair, Chris, how did we come up with this 16 feet? Is that in statute?
Yeah.
that is, in statute
Yes.
103E, the ditch law says, and that was even before, if you remember several years ago, the
Yeah.
previous governor pushed the 50-foot buffer.
Yeah.
So there are some benefits to being along a county ditch that's only 16.5 foot versus a 50-foot buffer.
I don't know if Rinky Newman's gonna have any ditch stuff again this spring.
Oh, I don't know. It's
No,
in
yeah.
had one last year.
Yeah, if they do, I would suggest,
Seminar on it?
yeah, a couple ago, we went to a lot of seminars at the beginning here. And, we're so far behind that we just gotta get caught up.
Maybe one benefit to a consultant is that they've worked with lots of different ditch authorities. They really couldn't provide me with most of them do this or most of them do that. They have ditch authorities that do both. Some ditch authorities say, nope, we're only gonna clean on one side. Some of them say, nope, let's go ahead and clean on both sides, even if it isn't increased cost, so.
But the driving factor has always been in ditch cleaning, has been drainage of agricultural land.
Right.
Sure.
And so that's
the vast
that's,
majority.
yeah, that's the major point you gotta look at when we're doing this.
Mr. Chair, Chris, you talked about doing County Ditch 6 first. How are you ranking how they need to be done?
Maybe when my office first started working on them. Ditch 6 is
Okay.
probably one that we first started working on, almost 4 years ago, probably.
Where do you see Ditch 3 falling in there?
Right behind that, and that's based on, repair petition.
Right,
So,
okay.
and then ditch 9,
Okay,
then ditch 10 and ditch 14 in that order, actually.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and actually, during this process, we wanted to go from ditch to ditch to ditch that,
right.
hooked up.
Are we, Mr. Chair, are we too early in the process to, what are the people saying?
Clean the ditch.
Yeah, clean the ditch, so, I mean,
They're
they're ultimately the ones paying for it.
Right.
They're all gonna want the ditch cleaned. It's
Oh,
when they
you
get
know,
the
when-
assessments they're
right.
not happy with.
Yeah.
But you'll have people in a public hearing that do not want the ditch cleaned,
Correct.
but the majority rules.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably the same people that are putting tile in these ditches too.
No, it'll be the people that are putting tile in want it clean. I don't know, we don't have no rules about that, do we? Tiling into the public ditch?
well, we're probably supposed to have some. They should be coming to us to get some, kind of like a permit, to make sure that the land that they are draining is,
Correct.
with the process we just completed, the redetermination of benefits, that land that they're draining, make sure that it was included in the assessments, so.
So the state statute right now says that you have to go, from the top of the ditch, you have to go at least 16 feet that's only supposed to have like grasses?
No, it doesn't have to only be grasses. It could be, you could have trees and plantings in there, 16.5 feet from the top. It has to be a perennial vegetation. And the idea is that stabilizes that bank and slope.
So you can have trees there.
You can, yeah. You don't have to, but you can have trees.
So-
Landowners are able to hay it too. That's permissible. That's a permissible activity within that 16.5 foot.
So we're removing them because the roots go down into the ditch, or why are we removing the trees then?
Well, let's say, like, if we're in the bank area or in the bottom, definitely we're wanting to remove those trees and shrubs just so they're not impeding the flow of water in the ditch. We will have to remove some if it's through a heavily wooded area, just to allow us to clean the ditch, to get equipment and machinery in there to clean it. The other reason would be to remove trees is to reduce the risk of deadfall. A tree dies and it falls down and blocks the river. Or beaver activity, they chew down the tree and build a beaver dam. There is a belief that if you take away all those trees, then you have less risk of beaver dams and stuff plugging the ditch as well.
They can pull them from a long ways. I know that. Is there
We
a
could just look at
consensus?
it ditch by ditch as we're
Yeah.
putting together plans. I bring a set of plans back to you and say, okay, on this particular ditch, what would you like to do?
I kinda think that's what we should do.
Yeah, I think that's the way we should go.
Because you're gonna see different I mean,
Yeah.
you got ditches out here that it's gonna be 100% ag cleaning but then you have your concern too, and that may show up at a different ditch.
I couldn't believe on ditch 6 that we're gonna have anybody that's gonna wanna clean one side.
Yeah, maybe ditch 6 may be ones that want to clean both sides. We get closer to the west side of the county, they may say, no, we like the natural look, we don't want to open it up, so.
Okay.
So a smaller tree, like an apple tree or something that's not gonna be a big problem if it, to go down or with the roots could be there?
We could say it could stay in there, yeah. I would say, as the engineer, if it's the top of the bank or farther away, that's okay. If it's in the slope of the bank, we'd probably want to go ahead and remove it, just to have unimpeded drainage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, totally. We gotta have some place to put the sediment too.
Yeah.
Right, spoil's gotta go somewhere.
It's gotta go
You're
somewhere.
not gonna just flick it into the trees.
I think it's ditch 7 out here. You ought to see the spoils are there from what, 15 years ago or something?
Oh, yeah.
That was a horrible clean job.
Yeah.
I mean, they're up as high as the ceiling some places. Water doesn't drain in. I mean, they said who did that. That was like, the county should have never been paying for that. And it was assessed back to the people, so.
What's typical is we cut swales into if you have those spoil piles, you're supposed to cut swales into them, so
Yeah.
overland drainage can still get to the ditch. All right. Well, what I heard is that we'll just kind of look at it as a ditch by ditch, case by case basis. And,
I think
I think that's good.
There goes your broad policy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just more meetings, that's all right.
And landowner preference, if you want it gone?
Yeah, well, that's one thing we have not done yet. We haven't reached out to landowners to ask them that.
Okay.
Those will be happening soon, though. I'll bring that
Good.
to the next board meeting.
Anything else for the ditch authority?
No, I don't have anything at this time.